over there, the Golden Dome, but I want you to look at Al-Aqsa right now. That's the Al-Aqsa, that's the third holiest site in Islam.
That's kind of fun.
Now it's considered the entire platform here, but historically speaking, when Omar ibn al-Khattab conquered Jerusalem, Jerusalem then gained great stature. It became much more important than it was before. It was the third holiest site. In fact, initially Muhammad prayed in the direction of Jerusalem because that was the holiest site at that time for everybody besides the pagans. So there were a lot of tribes in Saudi Arabia, Jewish tribes in Saudi Arabia, and it had a huge influence on Islam also. I don't know if you know the history of Islam, but Muhammad didn't have great success in Mecca, and he left and went to Medina with some of his followers in Mecca. Mecca was pagan and also had Jewish tribes. And in Medina, he gathered a much larger following and then returned in battle and conquered Mecca. It was almost a bloodless battle, they say, but it was a battle. And then he had Mecca as the holiest site, Medina the second holiest site, and Jerusalem as the third holiest site. But at that point, they also already changed their direction of prayer to Kaaba, which is in Mecca. So Muslims pray in the direction of the Kaaba, which is Mecca, which is that direction. So, and then, then in the Quran it says that Muhammad went to Al-Aqsa, the far holy place. That's the translation, the distant holy place. And there he received the teachings of the Quran. He went into the heavens, received the teachings of the Quran, and returned to Mecca on his winged horse. And that's where the holy stature starts of Jerusalem for Islam. And then politically it becomes much more important, as I said, from the Umayyads, because their center, political center, because of a conflict in Saudi Arabia, was moved to Damascus. And as it was in Damascus and then later by the Abbasids in Iraq, in Baghdad, this was a much easier pilgrimage site, and it is a pilgrimage, but not on the level of the Hajj. One should come to Jerusalem once a year, Muslims come, and it gained stature. But Omar ibn al-Khattab recognized that this was the platform of the building that shall not be named, because he actually asked the patriarch, the Christian patriarch at the time, to bring me to Solomon's building. And the patriarch, according to the story, brought him to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and he said, no, I want the building that Solomon built. And so then he was brought up here, and he saw that everything was in a state of complete destruction and rubble, which had been the case since Hadrian, and began to clean it up himself. And it's talking about his own humility, and in fact, the Jews were quite excited by his presence because they felt like he was going to be much more favorable to the Jews than the Byzantine Christian ruler at the time. So just to illustrate how history changes now you have outspoken statements about how the Jews have no connection. And that's coming from Muslim sources, but Muslim sources actually historically recognize this for what it is. So it just shows you how things change and how fake news also takes over truth and so forth. They call the entire platform Haram al-Sharif, Al-Aqsa. They call Jerusalem Al-Quds, which means the holy, and that's Qubat al-Sakra, the holy dome. It's not a mosque, it's a sanctuary covering the rock, the Holy of Holies. Al-Aqsa Mosque, if you look at it, it originally was wood and it then burnt, and then also I told you before that it's situated on a very earthquake-sensitive part of the platform, because underneath this platform there is no mountain. They're just arches, which Herod built in order to support the platform, in order to extend it, because the mountaintop wasn't so flat, right? And he also cut off a whole section. So it's earthquake prone, it's had a lot of damage, and in fact the building itself, you can tell from the pointed arch that it dates back to the Middle Ages. That's the architectural signature that you can see, which means that it was either Crusader or influenced by the Crusaders, or vice versa. The Crusaders may have taken the arch from the Muslims and brought it to Europe. We don't really know. Our historians don't know who had it first. The arch that enables you to raise the roof, and then that was highly developed in the Gothic period in Europe, and it got much higher, but there are a lot of mosques that use this motif. We have 7 entrances. Those are the 7 entrances to heaven. The entranceway, the main entrance, take a good look at it, because when we get to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you're going to see almost a carbon copy of that same entrance. So that ties it together, because that's a Crusader entrance. At the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it ties it together. The form is a basilica. The basilica form is a Roman form in architecture. It's not necessarily Christian. The synagogue also took it over from the Roman architectural, and the church also did. That was just Roman architecture that established this basilica form with aisles, nave going to an altar. That's a Roman form. And if you look at the black, white, red stone, the black, white stone is an indication that it's Mamluk. The Mamluks are the ones that drove the Crusaders out. Anytime you see that, it's Mamluk. That's 14th century until Ottoman period. They did a lot of building up here, the Mamluks. Maybars, they were from Turkey originally, slaves originally, and then flew over to Fatimid rulers. That's a lot of information. But
So non-Muslims can go in there?
No,
Cannot go
no,
in.
and women can't go in there either. Women go down here, down underground. They've built or renovated a mosque for women to pray in, and that is the place where they took a lot of stuff out and dumped it over the side in a radical non-status quo move on the part of the Muslim Authority up here, which I'm going to talk about in a more quiet place where we don't have to get into that. So, now even though I just said that Muslims can't go into Al-Aqsa and the Gold Dome, but they used to be able to, so it's not actually a religious issue as much as just a political issue. And in fact, people on official visit sometimes are granted permission, and even if they're not Muslim, like they might now walk into Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? As I told you, the Muslims can't go in, but that's because there are obviously some important officials.
So who can go in the other one?
Muslims. But when women use it for prayer.
This is the mosque, but that is not.
No, that's a sanctuary. It's just
What's the
dome.
how is the difference?
Well, a mosque is a place for prayer, like a church or a synagogue. It's a place where you gather for prayer, where the imam preaches. But again, a synagogue and a mosque can both be used. That you don't need a structure to pray, so you can use that for prayer. But officially, it's not a mosque. It was built as a sanctuary over the holy of holy stones
And
in
so
the
what
site of
happens
the building.
in-
Well, women can go in there and pray. They can pray there. They just have to face in the right direction. But it's closed to non-Muslims. I was in there 30 years ago, but it's been closed since 2000.
We were in there. We were in there when we were here before.
This is called a sabil. This is a fountain, and you'll have running water or fountains always near the entrance to a mosque, because before going to prayer, they have a ritual purity similar to Judaism, but it's just the washing of the hands, the feet, the ears, and the face before you go into prayer.
Did this used to be a mosque?
Which?
This?
It's not a mosque. It's a
No,
sanctuary.
did it used to be?
No.
I thought it was the Mosque of Omar.
That's a name like the Wailing Wall.
Ah, okay. Okay, good.
Yep,
That's
because they
good to
call
know.
it Kubat al-Sakhra, the Holy Dome.
Okay.
It's holy, but it's not a mosque technically.
Does teaching go on in there?
Teaching goes on everywhere. You don't need to be in a specific place. It goes on in
I
there.
mean, formal teaching by
Probably.
our beloved here.
Probably. But that, again, that's not at all bound to place in Islam or Judaism. That doesn't have to you don't have to get married in a synagogue either or in a mosque. You get married in a hotel. You know, in a wedding hall. You don't.
See, I told you it was okay.
That's the same in America.
Same in America.
You don't. In
Justice
fact,
of
you
the
don't
peace,
ever
the
get married
beach.
in a synagogue. Ever. Really.
Forest,
Yeah.
yeah.
You get married outside. It's important to get married under the stars, because those are the millions of stars that God promised Abraham's progeny. So you're supposed to get married that's a blessing to stand under the
Do
stars.
it when it's not snowing.
I got married in freezing weather.
And that's what our son did.
There were no stars over our head where we were in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Oh, really? Courthouse. Oh, by chance. So what do you go to visit the next higher planet? We're going to see the model tomorrow or Friday, and you'll see this is all flat, and there are different areas, spaces that were divided according to whether you were non-Jewish, Israelite, which tribe, Kohen, Levi, and high priest. And
Where would have been like when Jesus cleansed the area?
from the people who were
Where
selling
would-
money changers.
yeah.
That's below. That's
Oh,
where
that's
we
below.
were on the Herodian Street. There weren't markets up here.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is already, you've already gone through the purification, so you've already gone to the mikvahs. There are no mikvahs up here. The mikvahs are all below, where we were going up the steps, or down below by the Herodian Road, where the market stalls were. And then you go up. Yeah, there may have been there markets, but we saw markets down by the Herodian Road.
Yeah, I meant some mikvahs. I said.
Yeah, the mikvahs were all around, but not up here. By this point, you're supposed to already be pure, cleansed.
So then, why do we have this fountain?
Well, that's for the Muslims. That's new. That's a thing from the
Oh,
the Mamluks
Mixing-
provided, which they
mixing
provided a
belief
lot of running
systems.
water to Jerusalem during their reign. They were here 300 years, so they're famous for a lot of development, actually, much more so than the Ottomans.
So that would have been considered part of the temple down there. I mean, of the
that other
building.
place.
Where?
Down where they're selling this stuff. When they were selling this stuff.
No, I mean the temple is the holy precinct.
Because that's what I think that's what Jesus, what I always understood is what Jesus got all upset about.
Right,
is
was that
they
there was
were,
a lot of. I mean, it's connected because you had to trade
they
your
were
money
turning
in for.
the house into a den of thieves.
Right, but that would have been before you came up, and you had to use those marketplaces to pay, as you saw in that movie. You had to get that half shekel. That's where you had to buy your offering.
Yeah.
That was all down below.
Okay.
So what was the problem with that? It was that they were charging exorbitant fees to the people.
You know what? I'm going to give you an illustration. This will make it really real for you because you were just there also at the nativity. So you saw how crazy that was yesterday, and it was very calm compared to many times that I've been there. And I was standing there once, right at the place that is, you could say, the holiest site to Christianity. And I was standing there, and there was an Orthodox priest there, and there was a huge Orthodox group that arrived. And I don't want to say bad things about anybody, but this is what I witnessed. And the whole group arrived. This was present in the Catholic Church also for years because of indulgences. I know about indulgences because my grandmother converted to Protestantism. She was Catholic in part because as a child she remembers the indulgences that her poor mother had to pay the church in order to save her father's soul who had passed away, and they were dirt poor. She didn't have shoes till she was 12. And these pilgrims came, and very faithful Russian Orthodox pilgrims, and they want to give the priest a blessing because he has a higher status or something to put somewhere, I don't know where. But it's like putting a prayer in the wall, but you do that independently. You don't ask anyone to do it for you. You don't pay anyone to do it. So they all came with their prayers, or whatever it was that they wrote, and they handed it to the priest, and they all gave the priest an abundant amount of money. And it was just pouring in right there
Do not get any
at
idea.
the birth place of Christ. And then it gets worse. Because I was sitting there and I thought, okay, whatever. This has been going on also for 2,000 years. You can read about it in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre also. And that's just part of that pilgrim offering. But then the guide, it was a Russian guide, got his share.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my, this is just awful. And I wish I had taped it. And it was right there.
Yeah, nobody will believe this. I should have had a video.
But that's an illustration
Of what was going on
And that's
here.
what was going
Because when
on.
you put in politics and religion together, it's gonna, and it still exists today. There are a lot of people who in Israel who don't feel like, marriages are all conducted by you can have anyone conduct your marriage, but you need a signature. Then that's just a political thing from the chief rabbi of Israel, from the organization of the chief rabbi of Israel. Okay, so you need to get the okay. So whoever signs your marriage certificate, you can only get married religiously in Israel. There's no civil marriage for all denominations. That was to preserve the peace. But in fact, the huge secular population doesn't necessarily want to be involved with the rabbinate. They don't want the rabbinate to determine anything. So that's a huge. They feel like that's gotten too political. They have political power. They can make Netanyahu's government stand or fall. Right now, that was a big issue this week because a law was passed that the ultra-Orthodox have to serve in the military or do civil service, which they haven't had to do since the founding of the state. And the law is being pushed through Knesset, but they support part of Netanyahu's government because they have a good, strong political party. They don't care the least about the state of Israel. They are fervently religious, and they will use their power to get what they need. And if Netanyahu passes that law, they're pulling out, and his government will fall. These are the politics and religious powers. Once politics and religion get mixed,
It doesn't seem feasible, unless there were other places like that, that a couple of million pilgrims would be able to process through there. That small area down there.
Oh, it was all around.
So it was
All four
everywhere.
sides.
That was
Yeah.
just in one spot.
I mean, this is what they found. Who knows what's everywhere? You can't dig at Jerusalem. And there are different areas that you enter the temple.
So over there where that cemetery is, was this same thing was going on over there?
Where you mean where the mikvahs were, the steps for the Mount of
Where
Olives?
he's talking about over here, where the
That's
marketplace
where there were.
was,
That's where this
was over
main
here as
street was
well.
found, the Herodian Street. That was a main street
Yeah.
in the time of Jesus. But there were other approaches to the temple, and there were other entrance ways to the temple as well.
So can we say that because when they came up originally after the temple destruction, this was pretty decimated,
Right.
so that everything that's built here is pretty much
Oh yeah.
Muslim.
Yeah. Yeah. Since
Arab.
that period. Yeah.
So we're seeing-
Yeah, and the Templars were up here, the Crusader Order, and they founded their order here, and this was used as a church, and this was used as a church, and they did also reconstruction here.
With
So-
reference to the status quo, what feverish impatience exists with all this intolerance and domination and so on the part of Jewish people? I mean, is
Well,
there-
it's really a very small pocket that feels that that the hand should be pushed, and that we, and it
That's what I'm
and it
asking.
goes in way, but it's a very small group because politically this is not at all interesting to Israel. Israel needs to keep the peace and the status quo, and maintain the freedom of religion that exists here, and so the small pocket of temple people that believe that the third temple should be built and are doing things in preparation for that. I happen to know some of them personally. They believe that moves should be made to enable that, and that Israel should change the status quo up here, and that Jews should be allowed to come up here and pray. And I don't think that they're advocating tearing down anything, but because they believe it'll happen when the time is right. But that we need to prepare for that. And then that's mixed, because it's always very complicated, and then that's mixed even just with people who, like me, I'm not like striving to come up here because I want the third temple to be built right now, but I do believe in a democracy we need to show that everyone always has free access to all sites. For me, it's very important that we all come up here because we have the right, and we're going to. If they want me to cover my head, I will. I'll follow the rules of the Waqf, as long as they're rules, as long as they're not random. They're pretty random, and they have changed it. It's become less random. The fact that they're offering skirts now, that was an innovation. They've also learned how to deal with public much more. A year ago, they would come up to us and scream at us and be so rude, and all this just made you feel like, and now they're getting better at it. And
Just a year ago.
or even just 6 months ago.
Wow.
Those skirts didn't exist, and it would be so random. Oh, this is showing, that's showing, and then a lot of bad feeling, because people want to see the site too as a historical site, not even just from a religious standpoint, but also religiously. I mean, it has a history here, religious history as well. So that's very important to me. I understand why Jews can't come up here and pray.
So with,
Because it's provocative. But then I ask always my groups, that's provocative, but what's tolerance and what's provocative? I was standing at the Western Wall a month ago, and now there's a huge influx of Turkish pilgrims that come, and they're coming for Muslim religious reasons. They come here. Erdogan has said, go and visit Jerusalem. It's political again. But the people who come are fairly innocent. They're religious people, and they come up here, and they come to the Western Wall also, and they're welcome to come to the Western Wall. But I also make it an effort, if I see Muslim women there, to make sure they feel welcome, so that they don't feel threatened or anything. And I had an incredible encounter with 2 young women that came to the Western Wall, and they said afterwards they just couldn't believe it. It was so beautiful, and there was so much joy there. I don't know what they had expected, but they felt like it was the most beautiful religious site they'd ever been to. Not up here, down at the Western Wall. And that to me is very important, but it's important to me that they're allowed to come to the Western Wall, that all Christians can come to the Western Wall, and that the rules, even of modest dress, not be such a focus, so that it turns into a negative experience, right? I've told the woman who was in charge of modesty at the Western Wall that she should just lay off many times, like just let them go, but they provide you with things to cover it. So that's my stance, and I think that's the feeling of a lot of people who have grown up in a democracy. But don't forget, democracy is a very recent thing in this part of the world.
Very what?
Recent things.
So
So the understanding of tolerance and that's all very new here, because the Muslims don't think that they are being intolerant. They believe that the Jews are being provocative. If I start going like this, believe you me, if a walk sees me, if it looks like I'm praying, I'm out of here. Is that tolerance? Or am I being provocative? Which is which?
Yeah.
Is that really I mean, I know of a couple that came up here and they got married, a Jewish couple. That is radically forbidden up here. But they are very religious, believing, I wouldn't say messianic, but they are Jewish believers in Judaism, and they believe that that's the holiest place to get married. They showed no outward sign of their wedding. You don't need to. You just slipped the ring on her finger and said the verse that you have to say, and they were married up here.
So, I understand.
But if Muslims found out about that, and then it was in the press, and then you can start riots.
So maybe you already answered this, and I just didn't hear it. So on to your question, which you had asked. So I totally understand from a political standpoint, an Israeli political system, this is a religious site. It's
Right.
not political, so the interest isn't there.
Right.
But what is the overall interest of the Israeli people in having a third temple? I understand there's a pocket group.
20% of Israel is religious, meaning that they keep the Sabbath and kosher laws. 20% of 6.5 million. That's not very large.
Yeah.
And only a much less than 1% is interested in building a third temple. And a lot of religious Jews will not come up here. My daughter being one of them. She won't come up here. She won't come up here because she doesn't know where the Holy of Holies is, and she won't step near a place that is forbidden religiously. So, but you'll have a lot of religious Jews who are more right-wing than my daughter also, and they will come up here also because they want to make sure that they have the access, but they won't go up here. You would see them coming around only on the outskirts.
But they have no interest in a temple being built.
Those who visit, some of them are interested.
So I want to understand this exactly. This was the house.
Of God.
This up there.
Yeah,
And the Holy of Holies would have been in that direction, with all of the other in this
right.
direction.
And you'll understand all of that. On Friday, we're going to look at a model of the building at the time of Jesus, at the time of right before the destruction. It didn't stand very long, Which is
It
always
did
a
not?
surprise. No, Herod died and the building stopped, and then it was destroyed, like 30 years later.
It's remarkable that what was done by Herod was done in the time span that it was
But
done.
that's one of the remarkable things about Herod.
Yeah.
I mean, Caesarea was built in 12 years, and it was massive port. It was the second most important port in the Roman Empire.
When did the house begin to be built by Herod?
I think in 30 CE. That's what they say. That's what they say. Archaeologists say. So and how you do your dates, I'll leave that up to you. But
Yeah.
that's what.
So the animal activity was going on up there.
Yeah.